Hi, my name's Malis, and 3 hours ago, my sister threw my car keys on the ground, right in front of everyone, called me a parasite, and laughed as if my worth ended where my old Honda began. My mother nodded. My father said nothing. They thought I'd leave in silence, humiliated. But when a lieutenant walked in and said, "Ma'am, your helicopter is waiting," did you hear the part where the room went dead quiet? Because what followed, no one was ready for. The sun blazed overhead as I pulled my 12-year-old Navy sedan into the gravel lot behind the gleaming seaside chapel. Charleston in July was always suffocating, and today it felt like even the air was judgmental. My car wheezed one last breath before falling silent. Around me, luxury SUVs and white stretch limousines lined up like wedding cake toppers, sleek, polished, not a speck of dust in sight. I gripped the steering wheel for a moment, bracing myself. Deep breath. Shoulders back, head up. I stepped out, the hem of my navy dress brushing my calves. It wasn't designer, but I had ironed it to perfection. The shoes, polished military black leather from my time overseas, clicked against the cobblestone path. I had shined them the night before like a ritual. But as I looked around at the pastel silks and champagne heels of other guests, they made me feel like a museum relic. A valet gave me a hesitant glance as I approached. He looked maybe 20, baby-faced and trying to smile through discomfort. "Are you catering?" he asked, almost apologetically. I blinked. "No, I'm family, the bride's sister." "Oh." His face turned crimson. "Sorry, never mind." He quickly took the keys, like they were too hot to hold, and mumbled something about parking in the back lot. I gave him the smallest of smiles, enough to let him off the hook, not enough to pretend it didn't sting. Inside, the chapel air conditioning swept over me like a wave, cooling the sweat along my spine, but not the heat crawling up my neck. The scent of lilies mixed with the salty ocean breeze drifting through the arched windows. Photographers fluttered around, whispering instructions to guests smiling on cue. I walked in slowly, every step like entering enemy territory. I passed by white-clothed tables sparkling with cutlery and crystal glasses, each centerpiece a perfectly curated arrangement of roses, hydrangeas, and peonies. It should have felt like home. My sister's wedding, after all. But nothing about this celebration had room for someone like me. I reached the massive seating chart at the entrance of the reception hall. Names scrolled in gold script across ivory cardstock, elegant and impersonal. I scanned the list. Once, twice, a third time. Callista's name was there a dozen times. Bride, toast, head table, photo with parents, photo with sorority girls, but my name was missing. Panic tightened in my stomach like a fist. I flagged down a woman with a headset, clearly running the show. She was mid-step, mid-text, clipboard in hand. "Excuse me," I said. "I think there's a mistake. I'm not on the seating chart." She glanced up. "Name?" "Malis, the bride's sister." Her eyes widened slightly, a flash of something. Regret? Embarrassment? She scanned the chart, then her list, then glanced toward the room. "Oh, I see. There's been some confusion," she said, dropping her voice to a whisper. "There wasn't a place reserved for you at the main tables, but we do have an extra spot near the kitchen entrance. It's private. Quiet." "Near the service exit?" I repeated. "It's only temporary," she said too quickly. "We had some last-minute VIPs. I'm sure you understand." No, I didn't. But I nodded anyway. She led me through the room, weaving between clinking champagne flutes and laughter. Every step toward the back corner felt like a spotlight was following me. The table she pointed out was round, tiny, with one chair, tucked between the kitchen's swinging doors and a stack of unused serving trays. The smell of roast lamb and disinfectant wafted through every time the door opened. I sat, smoothing my dress, back straight. I would not cry. I had worn my uniform through war zones. I could survive a wedding reception. The band struck up a soft instrumental version of some top 40 ballad. A gentle tap on the microphone echoed through the room. I looked up to see her, Callista, gliding onto the stage in a dress that sparkled like frost under the lights. She was beautiful. Everyone clapped. I didn't. "Thank you all for being here," she said, her voice sweet as syrup. It means so much to have people who've truly supported me. She paused, then added with a smile. Even those who showed up in junkyard cars expecting a red carpet. Laughter burst through the room like fireworks. My jaw clenched. She descended the stage slowly, deliberately, each step like a declaration, her eyes locked on mine. When she reached my table, she bent ever so slightly and dropped my car keys onto the floor with a clink. "You're lucky to even be invited, parasite," she said, lips still curled in a smile, voice low but clear. A few heads turned. A fork paused mid-air. One man gave a nervous chuckle. Others pretended not to hear. I didn't move for a second. Then I bent down, picked up the keys from the polished floor. I caught my reflection in the steel, drawn, pale, foreign. Inside my mind, something clicked into place. A quiet voice. Not broken, not scared. Cold. Controlled. "This isn't the war. Not yet. But it's coming." The hand gesture was subtle, 2 flicks of the wrist, like someone asking for a drink refill at a bar without wanting to make a scene. I looked up and met the gaze of a man in a fitted navy suit with a pink pocket square. He tilted his chin toward the table where 2 empty wine glasses stood like expectant mouths. I didn't move. The soft hum of the ballroom returned, clinking cutlery, muffled conversations, a string quartet easing into their evening set. Then I exhaled, set my jaw, and walked over. "Could we get 2 more Chardonnays?" he said, flashing a smile that assumed we shared some private joke. "Oh, and maybe another breadbasket. Starving over here." I let the request float in the air, then replied calmly, "I'm not on staff." No anger, just clarity. The kind you use with someone who isn't intentionally cruel, just lazy with their assumptions. His face reddened immediately. "Oh, God, sorry. I thought with the shoes and never mind." "My mistake." He stared at my feet like they held the answer to his embarrassment. "You know how these events are," he added quickly, like that might cover the insult. "I do," I said simply. I turned away. A napkin fell from the next table. A woman glanced at it, didn't move, just waited. I bent, picked it up, placed it neatly back on her plate. She murmured a distracted, "Thanks," already deep in conversation with someone else. I returned to my tiny table near the kitchen doors, the one no one else had touched. But I didn't even make it all the way. An older woman intercepted me, pearls, hairspray, thick southern charm. "Oh, you must be new. Which catering company are you with, dear?" "I'm family," I said with a soft smile. Her face registered a polite shock. "Well, bless your heart. I had no idea." The phrase, sweet on the surface, sharp underneath, floated after her as she patted my arm and drifted away in a cloud of expensive perfume. The lights dimmed slightly. The music shifted to something softer. Candles flickered to life, casting shadows over the tablecloths and the crystal. I sat again, steadying my breath. I would not cry. Not tonight. Not here. Across the room, the photographer lined up the bride, my sister, and our mother near the floral arch. Flashes popped. I stood, meaning to slip outside, but a cousin intercepted me. "Hey, stranger, didn't think you'd show." I RSVP'd. He looked me over and gave a faint smirk. "Don't make it a thing, okay? Let her have her day." And there it was, the family mantra, disguised as advice. Don't make it complicated. Translation, stay invisible. The photographer called for immediate family. Then, the women of the Vance line. I hovered near the cluster, unsure where to stand. No one motioned me over. A guest with a baby whispered to my mom, "Isn't your other daughter supposed to be in these?" Without missing a beat, my mother smiled toward the camera. "Callista is the one who carries the family name with pride." I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse. I stood still, letting the ache settle like a weight I'd learned to carry long ago. I circled the room slowly, staying out of everyone's way. Conversations blurred around me. Destination weddings, influencer deals, summer homes, designer shoes. Occasionally, someone's glance would graze over me like I was part of the decor, neither a guest nor a stranger, just background. By the dessert table, a child tugged on someone's sleeve and asked, "Who is she?" Just a question, just a cut. I moved to a table set apart from the others, hidden behind a hedge. The ocean wasn't far. I could hear its hush beneath the music. I stared out and let my mind catalog the evening like a soldier taking inventory. The missing seat, the mistaken identity, the ignored napkin, the way champagne made its rounds, but never to me, the way I was invisible, on purpose. A young server approached, nervous. "Would you like some sparkling water, ma'am?" I nodded, touched by his courtesy. "Thank you, you're doing a great job." His face brightened. He hurried away. Then came the coordinator, headset and clipboard in hand. "I'm so sorry again about the seating. We can add a chair if you want." "Don't," I said kindly. "You can't fix the diagram with a chair." She hesitated, then backed away, grateful I hadn't made a scene. The music shifted again. From across the room, Callista's laughter rang out like a bell. My mother stood beside her, poised and radiant. They knew how to command a room, how to curate a moment. They were the lead actors. I wasn't even in the credits. Someone slid into the chair beside me, an old second cousin, one of those floaters who never stayed long. "You know how families are," she offered like a lifeline. "Some people just shine more. It doesn't mean anything." "It means something," I replied. "Everything does when you start keeping count." She blinked, unsure how to take that. "You always were intense." She left with a pat on my hand. More wine passed me by, more laughter I wasn't part of. A groomsman stumbled up and said, "You with the caterer? Can you get more decaf?" "I'm the bride's sister," I answered flatly. "Oh, my bad," he said, eyes wide. "Thanks for your service. Military, right?" Then walked away. The portraits continued, frame after frame without me, carefully choreographed moments that had no place for the inconvenient sibling. I wasn't forgotten. I'd been edited out. My mother's voice rose from a nearby group. "Callista is our legacy," she said with full conviction. "What about your younger daughter?" someone asked. "She lives her own life," Mom replied. "But Callista represents us." There it was. Final, framed as truth. I stood, walked slowly, not to flee, but to mark the moment. At the French doors, I stepped outside into the dusk, breathed in the sea air. My keys sat in my palm like truth, cold, weighty, impossible to ignore. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd erased me. And now? Now I was ready to reappear on my own terms. The patio smelled faintly of salt water and cut roses, a strange mix of the sea's honesty and carefully arranged beauty. I stepped closer to the long display table they'd set up just outside the reception hall, where the sound of silverware on porcelain and the occasional burst of laughter slipped through the open doors. String lanterns swayed lightly above, their glow casting flickers of warmth across the faces in the picture frames. For a moment, it looked like a memorial. Candles, florals, nostalgic photos. A still-life tribute to family. To Callista, really. It was meant to celebrate her. The bride, the golden child, the center of every orbit. The sign beside the photos read, "Our journey, her story." Beneath it sat rows of images printed on glossy paper and tucked into ornate frames. Some leaned against vintage books, others propped on tiny easels, as if to elevate the legacy even further. I walked along the table slowly, expecting, hoping, to see glimpses of myself. Surely, in a story that claimed to be about family, I existed somewhere. But as I moved past the frames, a cold, creeping awareness began tightening in my chest. Here was a birthday party at the beach house, Callista surrounded by cousins, glowing candles on a 3-tiered cake. My mother knelt beside her, steadying the platter. I remembered that day. I had been the one who passed out the cake slices, who collected crumpled napkins and fetched drinks for the younger cousins. But in the picture, there was no sign of me. The space where I'd stood was replaced with a decorative vase, placed just so. Another photo showed Callista's high school graduation. She was drenched in cords, medals, and pride, with our father grinning beside her. I had been there, behind the camera. I remembered wiping a fingerprint off the lens. I remembered cheering. Still, no one thought to include me in the moment they framed forever. I moved to the next photo and caught a sliver of myself, a bare shoulder just at the edge of the image, scar visible just above the dress sleeve. Cropped, The picture had been trimmed just enough to erase my face, my presence. Not forgotten, removed. I touched the glass, fingertips cold against it. Whoever had curated this collection hadn't made a mistake. They'd made a statement. This wasn't a matter of omission. It was intention. I took a step back. The evening air felt denser now, humid with something heavier than moisture. Grief, maybe. Or anger, or both. My breath slowed, steadied. This wasn't just a careless display. It was a pattern, now made plain. The erasure hadn't started today, and it wasn't passive. It had been unfolding quietly, deliberately, for years. A memory surfaced, sudden and sharp, my father's voice one winter evening, just after the new year. "Equal shares," he'd promised. "You and your sister." "I give you my word." He'd rested his hand on a manila folder, firelight dancing in the hearth beside him. I had believed him because I wanted to believe him, because I thought that saying it out loud meant it mattered. 6 months ago, I had signed the papers for a new investment firm. My idea, my business model, my late nights building projections while overseas. But I'd included Callista. I'd wanted her to be part of something real, something lasting. We had agreed on joint ownership, 50-50. 3 weeks later, I was mid-deployment, juggling time zones and half-slept hours, when the update came in. Just a routine adjustment, they said. Nothing major. I hadn't looked too closely. I told myself it could wait. Family came first. Now I knew better. I slipped my phone from my clutch and found the email. The subject line was dry. Updated agreement. Internal use. The message was worse. Short, efficient, smug. Thank you for your discretion. Callista deserves this opportunity. No greeting, no sender name, just that sentence, like it was meant to be swallowed and forgotten. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I had been written out of my own creation, erased with surgical precision, like I was a loose thread in someone else's curated legacy. I deleted the message, not because I wasn't angry, but because I didn't need their words anymore. The truth was in front of me, glossy, framed, celebrated. A false family history where I had never existed. That didn't happen by accident. That took work. That took effort. I stared at the photo with my shoulder and the ghost of my presence. "They stole what was mine," I whispered, voice barely louder than the flicker of candle flames. "And they want me to serve cake." The garden behind the display was quiet. A single caterer crouched near a hedge, lighting votives along the edge of the walkway. He looked up briefly, nodded, and returned to his task. He didn't hear me. Maybe that was better. I slid my phone back into my clutch and closed my hand around my car keys. They pressed firmly into my palm, cool metal shaped like something solid, something mine. Not just keys now, symbols of every moment they mocked, every piece of my life they tried to paint as small. The car I drove might not match their luxury standards, but it was mine, bought with my own work, not borrowed, not gifted. For the first time in hours, I didn't feel humiliated. I felt ready. A door creaked behind me. I turned, expecting another server or maybe a guest sneaking out for air. It was my father. He stood framed in the doorway, suit perfectly tailored, hands deep in his pockets like he didn't want them to betray his nerves. He looked at everything on the patio, everything but me. The silence stretched between us, brittle and unbroken. For once, I didn't rush to fill it. Let him speak. Let him flinch. Let the quiet expose what words had long concealed. "Beautiful night," he said finally, eyes on the lanterns. I said nothing. My silence was no longer a peace offering. It was a mirror. He took a step closer, still not meeting my eyes. The display. Callista wanted it just right. My jaw clenched. She got what she wanted. He nodded like he didn't hear the blade tucked beneath my words, or maybe he did. "I told them to include you," he said quietly, still watching the garden like it might save him. "They must have missed it." I let out a short, humorless breath. They didn't miss me. They edited me out. His lips parted, then shut again. Maybe he realized how thin that lie was. Maybe he didn't care. I turned back toward the table of photos and gently adjusted one of the frames, tilted it just slightly so the light no longer hit it perfectly. "There's still time," he offered weakly. I faced him again. No, there was time. You spent it. And just like that, I walked past him, heels clicking against the flagstone path, each step slicing through the narrative they'd tried to write without me. I wasn't forgotten, I was erased, and I was done pretending not to notice. The wooden threshold felt heavier under my palm than I anticipated. I paused as the door swung fully open behind me, the murmur of guests drifting through from the hall. My father's silhouette remained in the frame, hesitant, half-turned. I stepped forward into the corridor's dusky light and left everything else behind. "Father." My voice was quiet, but firm. He didn't respond. His eyes flicked from floor to wall as though he was considering the best route to avoid meeting mine. I closed the door behind me, the soft click muted by the carpet. The hum of the reception receded. In its place, a hollow quiet, so sharp I could hear the echo of my own breath. My heart beat in my ears. I wasn't uncertain. I was asking for acknowledgement. He cleared his throat. "Melis," he said, low. "You know how things are." "I'm trying to understand," I replied. I stepped closer. "You promised me once you'd treat your daughters equally. What changed?" He shifted his weight. His hands remained buried in his pockets. "It's complicated." He paused, then, "I didn't want things to be this way." No apology, no eye contact. The words hung like a mirror filling with cracks. I swallowed. "Did I do something wrong? Or did you just stop seeing me?" His silence answered me. I swallowed again and turned toward the reception doors. The laughter, the music, everything sounded a degree off. I stood tall. My father opened his lips but didn't speak. I kept moving. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Callista, presence sudden. Her arms came around me in a practiced embrace, the crowd inches away, eyes flicking between us and the camera flash. "Smile for the camera," she whispered with a softness that chilled. The shutter clicked somewhere behind us. She squeezed me once then, inches from my ear. "Tuck your chin and wave like a good girl. After today, no one will remember your name." Her breath smelled like perfume and triumph. I felt the gesture reverberate, fake, intrusive, a public display for cameras that were already zoomed in. My face stayed neutral, my body rigid. Inside, I cringed. My fingers curled at my sides, nails pressing into my palms. This hug was a trap, a show. I would survive it without blinking. I straightened out of her arms. The photographer's flash flickered again, capturing the two of us together. She slipped away, blending back into the crowd, leaving me standing in silence. I took a breath, the corridor air cool against my face. The wallpaper was pale, patterned, floral, but turned new by the sharpness of the moment. Shadows from the overhanging lights curved strangely on the carpet. Somewhere a waiter passed by with the clang of a tray. Before me, a screen with live images from the ceremony, the bride and groom, their families, flashed in a digital loop. My mother's posture looked proud. Callista's radiance filled every frame. I scanned the screen, expecting to find myself, but my silhouette did not appear. Faces glowed under soft lights. Bridesmaids, parents, guests, me. I was a ghost in a mirrored story. I whispered, "Let them crop me out again. This time, I'll show them what they missed." A shift in me snapped. I stopped letting them define me. Footsteps echoed behind. I turned. My father had followed. His jaw was tight, and when he spoke this time, his voice was nearer. "Melis, please." "You never asked," I said. "Not once." He paused. The weight of years hung between us. Then I walked past him, into the reception hall, just as the host's voice echoed through the microphone announcing speeches. A hush fell. Guests snapped to attention. My mother caught my entrance mid-lipstick check and nodded imperceptibly to the host. In that moment, names were being removed from speech lists. I felt the thrum in my chest. The current of the night was shifting. I didn't go toward the spot where I'd been denied the stage earlier. Instead, I moved to the flank of the room, just inside the edge of light. I watched Callista wave to cameras, Mother standing behind her, proud. The orchestra swelled, chairs scraped. A toast was about to begin. I clenched my keys in one hand and let my other fall to my side. No chair, no entry, no invitation, but I was already in the narrative now. I would not exit silently. A cousin leaned toward me and whispered, "You looked strong out there." I nodded. Strength was not a thing you displayed. It was a quiet line you held under fire. Then I saw my name on the screen for a second, flickering in the ticker announcing speakers. Someone had left it in. I caught the ghost of it before it disappeared. That was validation enough. I stepped into the hall just as someone called for champagne to be served. A server passed in front of me, stumbling slightly, and I caught the glint of confusion flash in his eyes. And he offered a glass to the bridal table. I half reached, but stopped. This wasn't my place. Not yet. I stood there, holding myself up in the bright glare of spotlights and camera flashes. I was no longer invisible. The night hadn't ended its script. It was letting me write my own lines now. I caught my reflection in the tall mirror of the vestibule as I walked back into the reception hall. The halls had dimmed, candles flickered along the buffet line. I could feel every eye flicker toward me, a ripple across the crowd like wind over water. My keys, still gripped in my hand, felt heavier now, as though they carried every judgment, every omission from earlier chapters of my life. I took a breath and moved toward the stage. In my mind, I recited the opening lines of the speech I'd practiced for weeks. But halfway there, my mother stepped in front of me, her posture perfect and her face smooth. She was wearing that satin shawl she only broke out for gala nights, framed by photographers. Her lips curved into a polite, controlling smile. "This part of the ceremony is just for the image Callista curated," she said, her tone mild but firm. She didn't apologize. She claimed authority. I froze mid-step. The crowd shifted, glasses clinked, whispers curled around me. I felt the immediate rush of humiliation. This speech was my voice, my one moment to show I existed beyond the shadows. I swallowed and found my voice. "Mother, I prepared for this." My tone was even. This was my chance. Elowyn's head tilted. "I'm doing this for her, for our family's reputation. You understand how things look." Her voice softened only so the audience would hear. I felt my stomach hollow. She was putting my honesty in service of a brand. My identity as sister was being leveraged and edited. I looked at the cluster of guests, the counselor, the aunt who always spoke in concerned tones, the strangers wearing rented tuxes, and I realized I was performing for them, not living for myself. Her jaw clenched. "It's strategic, not personal." She paused. "We need to present consistency. Callista is the face, the voice, our standard." I stepped back, chest tight. I heard the soft murmur of cameras and clinking glasses. So I'm the ghost in the frame. Eyes flicked to me. A cousin shifted. A waiter paused his route to a tray of champagne. The background music quieted as people leaned in. Then, a junior staffer, flustered, holding a thick binder, walked straight past us. Their clipboard slipped, and papers fanned out. Charts, agreements, legal pages. My breath caught. The binder had Callista Vance, wedding funding, investor agreements, scrawled across its tab. But inside, I recognized the cover page, my name along with signatures, dates I'd typed myself in a quiet hotel back in D.C. They hurried off without apologizing, and I caught sight of the page beneath. An investment contract signed in my name, later adjusted so that Callista was sole owner. My contributions, my stake, erased. My gaze flicked upward at my mother, then at Callista, now faced forward and composed as if nothing happened. My voice came calm but edged. "You erased me from speech opportunities. Then you erased me from your books." The room stretched quiet. My mother's painted lips parted. Her eyes flickered, a flicker too late. She tried something like regret, then masked it. "You're making this personal," she said. I raised my chin. "Isn't it personal when you take what I built and cast me aside?" A hush followed. The hubbub of the reception dimmed to a distant surge. She laughed, low and poised. "You wouldn't dare make a public scene." Tension spanned a breath. I lowered my voice so only she could hear. "Try me." She paled, for a fraction. The camera lights flickered above. Someone coughed. My father appeared behind her, wanting to step in, but restrained himself. I didn't wait for applause or backlash. I walked away. My steps rang on the floor, each one a statement. I walked past the buffet, silver trays glinting under soft lights. Dessert platters waited untouched. I left untouched. On the edge of the room, I paused in the hallway. A server passed with a tray of glasses. A hand brushed mine. Accidental. I didn't flinch. I straightened my shoulders. Then I felt it. A small envelope poking out of my clutch, cream paper, name barely visible. I hadn't noticed it during the ceremony, but there it was. My fingers trembled as I retrieved it. I walked toward a quiet corner near the coat check, out of sight of cameras but still in hearing distance. Hands steady now, I opened the envelope. The paper inside, crisp and folded, held lines typed in the neat font I recognized. My name, Callista's name, signatures, figures. A legal notice from a firm in Charleston. It affirmed that the entire wedding investment, originally under my name, had been transferred to Callista Vance. After years of managing our shared accounts, submitting proposals, securing funding, I was now the silent financier, my name removed. I swallowed hard. The blood pounded in my ears. Betrayal tastes sharp, like salt on fresh skin. They'd used my trust fund. They'd disguised it as generosity. They'd framed it as family support. But here was the knife in print. I slid the document back into the envelope and tucked it away. My lips pressed in a thin line. Tears threatened. I glanced at my reflection in a silver platter nearby, saw my jaw set. I would not cry, not tonight. I emerged from that corner into the hall just as applause rose. The host was calling for the wedding toast. I returned, discreet, mingling at the periphery. The toast began. Champagne raised, voices lifted. I watched Callista with a measured gaze, soft praise, bright eyes. Behind her, my mother nodded. Behind them, the crowd. Cheers, smiles, snapshots. It all felt tight and rehearsed, but I saw the cracks. I lifted my glass, though no toast had been offered to me. I didn't speak, but I was present. Then I slipped back toward the hallway, keys in hand, ready to exit not as a ghost, but as someone reclaiming space. The hallway narrowed and curved toward the terrace doors. I pressed my palm against the cool brass handle, pushing it open just enough to slip outside. The night air greeted me, soft, humid, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the estate garden. It was darker now. The moon had crept above the tree line, scattering a weak silver glow over the grounds. Somewhere behind me, laughter rose and fell inside the hall, muffled by the thick glass doors. I walked to the edge of the terrace, my heels muted on the stone tiles. My clutch felt heavier. The envelope still peeked out, cream paper worn at the edges. I drew it out, sat on the low stone balustrade, and unfolded it carefully. The handwriting stopped me. Clean, precise, written with a fountain pen that left strong, even strokes. At the top, Lieutenant Colonel John Harris. Postmarked 3 months ago. My breath caught. I'd been overseas when this letter should have reached me. It had somehow been buried at the bottom of my deployment bag until today. I read it once, then again. You are not just a soldier, Malus. You're a force. You carried entire teams through storms of doubt and fire. Don't let anyone rewrite your history, not even family. When they underestimate you, remember what you've already survived. Stand. You're more than their version of you. The paper trembled lightly in my hands. It wasn't grief making them shake. It was recognition. A piece of me I'd put on hold slid back into place. My lungs filled deeper. I folded the letter along its worn crease and slipped it back into the envelope, then into my clutch. I rose. A voice behind me, drunk, familiar, one of the groomsmen, called out from the doorway. Hey, did they finally let you back in? He grinned like it was a harmless joke. I turned my head slightly, let a small smile curve my lips. Not friendly, but controlled. They don't let me anywhere, I said. I walk myself in. He blinked, thrown off balance. Well, cheers to that, I guess. He wandered off. I exhaled, slow. My hand drifted to the railing. The hum of cicadas filled the night, The terrace stretched out, empty except for me. In the distance, the estate's lawn rolled down to a tree line. Beyond that, a dark slice of marsh. Inside, Callista's voice rose over the microphone, sweet and commanding. She was thanking her guests. Photographers moved like hawks, snapping at angles. The hum of polite applause filtered through the doors. I stepped back inside, not toward the stage, but toward the far edge of the room. My heels clicked softly on the polished wood. Guests turned as I passed. Their smiles faltered. Some whispered. I ignored them. Then I heard it. A low, deep vibration in the air, like thunder held under a lid. At first I thought it was the bass from the band, but it grew louder, steadier, until glasses trembled on the tables. People lifted their heads. Conversations trailed off. The chandelier crystals quivered, scattering dots of light across the walls. A beam of white sliced through the windows from above, cutting across the reception hall. Guests gasped. Chairs scraped. "What is that?" someone murmured. I moved closer to the doors. Outside, a military helicopter hovered just above the estate lawn, blades chopping the night. The noise was deep, powerful, undeniable. The doors swung open without anyone touching them. A man in crisp uniform stepped inside. Lieutenant Colonel John himself, posture straight, medals gleaming under the lights. His presence carried the kind of authority you don't question. He scanned the room once, then fixed his gaze on me. His voice cut through the silence. "Ma'am, your helicopter is ready for departure." The room stilled. Someone dropped a fork. Guests looked from him to me, confusion mixing with awe. Callista froze mid-sentence, microphone clutched in her hand. I walked forward slowly, the crowd parting without a word. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. Elowyn's fingers tightened around her wine glass until it clinked. I didn't speak. My silence was louder than any accusation. I passed the bridal table. Callista's eyes followed me, wide and glittering. "Malis, what is this?" she hissed. I stopped just enough to glance at her. "The truth," I said softly. "It always arrives." Then I kept walking. Lieutenant Colonel John stepped aside, offering me his hand like a door to another world. Cameras flashed behind us, but no one dared move closer. The doors to the terrace stood open, the rotor wash stirring the tablecloths, lifting petals from the flower arrangements. I walked out onto the terrace. The night air hit me again, this time filled with wind and sound. The helicopter's lights cut a halo across the estate grounds. I descended the stone steps with steady movements. My heels found their grip. My dress shifted around my legs. I was no longer a shadow, no longer a cropped-out figure at the edge of the frame. At the foot of the steps, I paused and looked back once. My mother was standing, eyes wide, hand over her chest. Callista still clutched the microphone, but no words came. The guests were silent, their phones raised but forgotten. I turned back to the helicopter. The rotor wash pulled my hair loose from its pins. Lieutenant Colonel John extended his hand again. I took it. From the doorway, I turned once more, because what happened next wasn't part of my plan. I stepped off the terrace and into the reception tent, the rhythmic hum of rotor blades still echoing behind me. The helicopter's descent had already disrupted the flow of clinking glasses and polished lies. Now, its sound reverberated through the glass-paneled walls, commanding a silence more effective than any speech. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks froze mid-air. Eyes scanned the entrance, uncertain of what or who was coming. And then they saw me. Their eyes widened, struggling to reconcile the woman who had once been edited out of family portraits with the one now striding in, heels confident on white flooring. I wore my dress uniform, polished, pristine, its weight both literal and symbolic. Metals glinted under the glow of the chandeliers. My shoulders, squared and steady, bore more than fabric. They bore my story. The whispers were immediate, unable to contain themselves. Is that her helicopter? She's in the military? She looks powerful. Why didn't anyone ever say, exactly? Why didn't they? The band, mid-song, stuttered to a halt, as if the silence between notes was louder than anything they could play. The air thickened with unspoken history. My history. I walked down the aisle between tables adorned with roses and plated duck. past people who had once told me I should keep my accomplishments modest, quiet enough not to disturb Callista's spotlight. I passed the projector screen where a curated slideshow of Callista's picture-perfect life had been playing. Childhood giggles, teenage glamour, business brunches. Then something flickered. The image warped, as if rejecting its own narrative. The slideshow vanished. A new video began to play. Callista's face filled the screen. Not the bride, not the polished entrepreneur she marketed herself to be, but raw and unguarded. Her mascara was smudged, her eyes rimmed red. Her voice cracked. "I know I stole that deal. I know Malis will never forgive me. I'm sorry." Gasps filled the tent like a wave hitting shore. A wine glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered. My stomach clenched, but not from surprise. I had known it would play. I had made sure of it. What shocked me was how loud the truth sounded when you stopped whispering it. Callista lunged forward, screaming, "That's a fake! You edited this!" She slammed her hand against the mic stand so hard the sound echoed like a slap. "No," I said quietly, but I didn't need to be loud. The footage spoke louder than anything I could shout. Beside her, Elowen, forever the loyal shadow, scrambled toward the AV console. Her fingers clawed at wires. She yanked the plug. Black screen. A heartbeat of silence. Then the video restarted, projected from a hidden source. Same confession, same tears. Undeniable. The crowd stirred like leaves caught in wind. Faces paled. Some guests looked at each other with open mouths. Others turned away from Callista and Elowen altogether. The illusion had cracked. No one clapped. No one tried to fix it. They just watched. And for once, they truly saw. Through the tension, a voice broke through. Calm. Measured. The truth always lands, whether you like it or not. Lieutenant Colonel John stepped forward. His presence was a wall of calm authority, his eyes on mine. I gave a subtle nod. He had stood by me when others stepped away. A reminder, I had not come alone into this reckoning. I moved forward again and the crowd parted. A few people stood to greet me. One elderly veteran removed his cap and saluted. I returned it instinctively. The acknowledgement pierced deeper than any applause I could have received. Callista now stood frozen at the stage, her face contorted between rage and embarrassment. The veil in her hair drooped, forgotten. Her bouquet lay discarded on the ground. Elowen had shrunk behind her, hands trembling. My mother sat in the front row, her expression unreadable, eyes darting between her perfect elder daughter and the younger one she had underestimated for years. But I saw something flash across her face, not guilt, not remorse, fear. An aunt stood up then, voice quivering, but her words rang out like bells in a quiet church. "You lied to protect your spotlight, and you lost your light completely." The room fell even stiller, as if that sentence had knocked the wind out of everyone. People exchanged glances. Some nodded, others gasped. I saw friends of Callista's slowly rise, gathering their purses, turning toward the exit. The spell had broken. I stood before the stage, just steps away from Callista and Elowen, yet worlds apart. Cameras flashed behind me. Their red lights didn't daunt me. They empowered me. After years of being silenced, dismissed, and manipulated, I had chosen this moment to reclaim the narrative. Callista tried again to speak, but her words crumbled in her throat. She let out one final, piercing scream, and I stepped up to the microphone. The metal was cold under my fingertips. I took a breath, not to steady myself, but to make room for the clarity that had long waited to be voiced. I didn't come here for revenge. I came to stop pretending. My voice rang out, clear. I paused, let it land. You all celebrated lies dressed as legacy. You ignored sacrifice because it didn't wear heels or post selfies. But silence is not grace, and the truth is not cruelty. It is correction. There was a stillness after my words, like breath held, a moment no one would forget. I stepped back from the microphone and looked toward the terrace doors. Beyond them, the night sky stretched wide, the helicopters still waiting. One final glance at the bride, her crumbling kingdom at her feet. One final glance at my mother, who had chosen a narrative over a daughter. And then I walked away. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need to stay. Not anymore. I stood at the edge of the terrace doors for a breath, my hand hovering just above the glass pane. The hum of the helicopter's blades had slowed to a deep, rhythmic thud, like the drumbeat before an execution. The night air clung to my skin, heavy with the scent of gardenias and old wine. Behind me, inside the grand reception hall, silence had replaced laughter. All the voices, all the clinks of cutlery, had gone still, as if the moment had leaned forward to listen. When I turned and stepped back into the room, I felt the shift in energy ripple through the crowd like static. My heels struck the marble with precision, each click a countdown. People turned in their chairs, heads tilted, brows furrowed. Some looked away in guilt. Others stared openly, almost hungry, but none of them dared speak. The stage waited at the far end, sterile and glittering under white spotlights. The microphone stood alone, untouchable, untouched. For a second, I wondered if it would screech again when I approached, like a last protest. But then I reminded myself, I wasn't here for performance, I was here for closure. As I walked down the aisle between velvet-draped tables, I noticed my sister Callista still clutching her mic like a crown, frozen in place near the edge of the platform. Her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. My mother sat just beneath the stage, her posture stiff and expression unreadable, but her fingers had started trembling on the clutch bag she held like a lifeline. I climbed the stairs slowly, calmly. My hand adjusted the microphone. It gave a small squeak before falling silent. I stood there, alone, under their scrutiny. But this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't blend into the shadows. I belonged exactly where I was. "I've been the silent one," I began. My voice was even, but it carried the forgotten one. "The extra seat at this table for years." There was a pause, a sharp inhale somewhere in the audience. A few faces twitched, recognition blooming like bruises. "But you didn't forget me," I continued, scanning their faces. "You erased me, deliberately, from your memories, your photos, your speeches. You rewrote history as if I didn't exist. I let that truth hang in the air. You edited me out of your legacy," I said. "You made sure I wasn't in the picture unless someone needed a prop, a driver, a favor. And I let you. For years, I let you." I saw Elowen squirm, her eyes darting nervously to the woman beside her. But no one paid her any mind now. The room was facing forward for once. I signed contracts thinking they were for the good of the family, only to discover my name was conveniently absent when the time came to share credit. I came home from service overseas to find my room gone, and my presence an inconvenience. A murmur went through the room. Even the catering staff had paused, plates in hand, watching. "So," I said, planting both hands on the podium, "let me make something crystal clear." I stood tall, no stammer, no apology. "I resign from your story, from your gossip threads and inheritance calculations, from your false narratives and empty holidays. I am not your afterthought anymore. I remove myself from your family tree." Gasps tore through the crowd. A woman near the back audibly said, "My God," while another clutched at her pearls. But no one moved. No one dared. "Yes," I confirmed, answering the question they didn't ask. "This is final. You don't get to call me when you need someone to fix your chaos. You don't get to summon me to show your generosity or your tolerance. I'm done playing that role." A single pair of hands clapped, then another. Tentative at first, then it faded. A handful of people glanced at one another, unsure what the rules were now. My mother's lips parted, but she didn't speak. I think for the first time, she realized she had no script for this. Callista stood still, the mic dangling at her side now like a useless ornament. Her jaw trembled as if she wanted to scream or sob, but she couldn't choose which. "I'm not angry anymore," I added quietly. "I'm not seeking revenge. I'm just reclaiming what you tried to deny me." I touched my chest gently, almost reverently. My name, my future, my peace. A cousin, Amelia, I think, rose slowly from her chair, eyes glassy. She walked to the edge of the stage, voice barely audible. "I should have stood up for you sooner." I gave her a small nod. This isn't about guilt. It's about finally telling the truth out loud. She wiped her eyes and returned to her seat, more fragile now than before. At the far left, I saw an uncle lower his head, staring into the folds of his napkin as if it held answers. A great aunt dabbed at her mascara with a trembling handkerchief. Outside, the helicopter's blade slowed into a gentle whir. "I'm not your embarrassment," I said, soft but firm. "I'm not your secret to bury. I'm not your warning story, and I never was." I took one step back from the podium. The mic wobbled slightly but held its position. The silence in the room was thick and sharp. I could feel the weight of their stares, the heat of their regrets pressing in on them. I breathed, really breathed, for the first time in years. Then I added, "From this moment on, I write my own story. You're no longer the authors." I turned from the podium, and the weight that had sat on my shoulders for most of my life fell away in pieces. My spine straightened. My hands felt light. I started descending the stage, every step a step out of a cage. My path through the hall was clear now, not because they had made way, but because I had stopped asking for permission. And just as my heel touched the floor, a tall figure stepped into my path. I froze. It was him, Dad, the last person I ever expected to stand in my way, or maybe the only one I had hoped would. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching me with unreadable eyes. The years had not been kind to him, nor had they made him soft. But there was something in his face that had not been there before. Hesitation, regret, maybe even pain. His lips parted, but I held up a hand, not to silence him, but to stop the cycle. "You had your chance," I said, quiet, direct, and I waited far too long for words that never came. He looked like he might say something anyway, but he didn't. He stepped aside, and I walked past him, not broken, not bitter, just finally free. The space between the stage and the floor felt wider than it was, like crossing an invisible threshold. I moved slowly, aware of every eye still tracking me. The room was quieter now than it had been all evening. No clinking glasses, no forced laughter, just a muted rustle of fabric as guests shifted in their chairs. The music had long since stopped. The only sound outside was the low, steady thrum of the helicopter, a sound that had somehow become my heartbeat. I reached the last step down from the stage and saw him standing there. My father. Hands at his sides now, no longer in his pockets. For the first time that night, his eyes met mine and didn't slide away. There was a kind of stillness in his face. Not defeat, not exactly sorrow, but something like acknowledgement. I stopped in front of him. The crowd behind us blurred into the background. My hands hung at my sides, still trembling faintly from the adrenaline of speaking aloud what I'd kept inside for years. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. For a moment, we just stood like that, two figures separated by more than space. The years stretched between us, the missed birthdays, the silent dinners, the times I'd hoped for a call that never came. And yet, here he was when almost everyone else had turned their faces or their backs. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn box, no bigger than a deck of cards. The leather cover was cracked with age, the brass clasp dull but intact. He held it out toward me without a word. My breath caught. I took the box from his hand, fingers brushing his for a second. They were colder than I remembered. When I flipped the clasp open, the lid creaked softly. Inside lay a pen, sleek, dark, with a tiny gold insignia near the clip. The family's military service pen. I'd seen it only once before, in an old photo of my grandfather pinning it to my father's pocket before he left for basic training. It was a symbol passed from veteran to veteran, meant to signify honor, responsibility, and the weight of one's name. My father still hadn't spoken. His eyes glistened under the soft lights. He gave a small nod, barely more than a dip of his chin, but it landed harder than any speech. My throat tightened. For a split second, I almost broke. Instead, I straightened and saluted him, not military perfect, but enough. His mouth twitched, almost a smile, then settled. I closed the box and held it to my chest. Thank you, I said quietly. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't surrender. It was recognition, given and received. The crowd seemed to sense the finality of it. Nobody clapped. Nobody whispered. A few relatives wiped their eyes. A younger cousin leaned toward her mother and whispered, "Is she leaving?" Her mother shushed her gently. I stepped past my father. He didn't stop me this time. As I moved toward the terrace doors, the crowd parted again, but now it wasn't out of shock. It was out of respect. Some people nodded slightly as I passed. A woman near the exit murmured, "God bless you." I didn't slow. Outside, the evening air had cooled. The sky had shifted from indigo to a deep, bruised purple at the horizon. The helicopter's blades turned lazily now, waiting. Lieutenant Colonel John stood at the bottom of the stone steps, one hand on the open door of the aircraft. His silhouette was solid, steady. "Ready?" he asked when I reached him. I nodded. "Let's go." He stepped aside to let me climb in. I placed the pen box carefully into my clutch before taking the hand he offered to steady me on the steps. The wind tugged at my hair, at the edges of my uniform, but I moved with it, not against it. At the top of the steps, I turned once, not at the people behind me, but at the version of myself I was leaving in that hall. The girl who bent to pick up keys, who swallowed words, who thought silence was the only way to survive. She was still in there somewhere, but she wasn't driving anymore. Inside the helicopter, the interior light was low and warm. I slid into the seat, buckling in as John climbed in after me. The door shut with a firm click, sealing off the last echoes of the reception. The rotor's hum grew deeper, vibrating through my bones. I looked down at my hands. The pen box sat in my lap. I ran my thumb over the worn leather, thinking of the years it had spent in my father's pocket, the decades of service behind it. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't a fix, but it was something, an acknowledgement, a transfer, a bridge over a chasm that might never fully close. Out the window, the wedding hall grew smaller, softer, the bright lights inside turning into a blur of gold and shadow. I could see figures still standing at the doors, but their shapes were indistinct now. They belonged to another story. "I didn't destroy a family today," I murmured, mostly to myself. "I freed myself from one." John glanced over but didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The engines roared a little louder, the helicopter lifting slowly off the ground. I felt the shift in my stomach, the lift under my seat, the way the earth fell away in increments. "Some wounds will never close," I said quietly, fingers tightening on the pen box. "But they no longer define me." The sky ahead of us opened, streaked with the last pinks and oranges of dusk. Beyond the marshes lay the dark line of the mountains. I drew a deep breath, the kind that fills you from the inside out. This was my moment. My name, my history, my future, all mine now. As the helicopter rose higher, the estate shrinking to a dollhouse below, I leaned close to the window and whispered to the wind, "Watch me now." Sometimes walking away isn't a retreat, it's a reclaiming of power. This story isn't just about a sister's cruelty or a mother's silence, it's about how quiet endurance can become fierce independence. Have you ever been treated like a background character in your own family's story? Maybe it's time to rewrite the script. If this story moved you or reminded you of something in your own life, share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear them. And don't forget to subscribe for more true, powerful family stories that aren't afraid to speak the truth.